After completing his cattle drive, the first order of business for a cowboy was to purchase new clothes and make a visit to the barbershop. Whether the sign displayed barbershop or tonsorial parlor, the cowboy easily identified it by the distinctive red, white, and blue pole, a relic from the days when barbers practiced surgical techniques like bloodletting. This visual cue made it accessible for the cowboy, regardless of his literacy. Most barbershops operated 7 days a week, typically from 9 a.m. to 11 p.m., with a noon closure on Sundays. If a cowboy arrived on a Saturday, the barbershop was likely bustling with eager patrons. Although women occasionally entered barbershops for haircuts, the prevailing practice was to refrain from serving women and children on Saturdays, mainly due to the challenges posed by the thicker hair often found in women. The barbershop's grandeur or simplicity depended on the town's size. In smaller towns, the barber might work particularly in remote mining settlements where a tent's rear could serve as the cutting space. However, wielding a razor and scissors on inebriated clients posed significant risks, prompting most barbers to establish their standalone shops as soon as possible. Given the Victorian era's aesthetics, barbers aspired to furnish their spaces lavishly, sourcing most items from specialized mail-order businesses. It was customary for each barbershop to feature one or more spittoons, except in cases where the flooring was made of dirt. Inside the barbershop, the cowboy would get updated on national, state, and local news, learning about the best places to spend the night, grab a meal, or find companionship. In bustling shops, barbers might hire porters to assist with towels, sharpen razors, and handle tasks like refilling hot water urns and managing tubs. On hectic Saturdays, barbers might even teach boys as young as 7 to shave customers if they were their children. When the cowboy's turn came, he'd sit in a tall chair with a separate footstool. The familiar reclining chair we know today wasn't patented until 1881, gaining quick popularity. If the cowboy rode into a town like Dodge City in the late 1800s, he'd likely check his guns at the sheriff's or marshal's office upon entering. If not, to ease any discomfort, he'd unholster his pistol and position it on his lap, allowing the barber to cover it with a cape. The cowboy would tilt his head back, and warm, moist towels would be placed over his face to soften his beard. Ideally, as the towels cooled, they would be replaced twice more with warmer ones. After removing the towels, barbers in more remote areas would utilize a basin of water and a soap ball to create lather, using their fingers to apply it to the cowboy's beard. By 1870, most barbers had shaving mugs with circular bars of soap and shaving brushes, preferably crafted from badger hair. In larger towns, an elegant cabinet might be present to hold the personalized shaving mugs of regular customers. From the 1830s onward, razors started featuring intricately etched blades adorned with trademarks, mottos, and advertisements. During the Civil War, blades bearing eagles, flags, and sentiments like "Save the Union" gained immense popularity in the North. The handles of these razors could be crafted from materials such as ivory, bone, mother of pearl, or gutta percha. However, the majority were fashioned from black or clear horn. Although barbershops typically used simpler designs, barbers often kept 7 razors in a row, believing it would maintain the blade's sharpness if given time to rest. Prior to starting, the barber would sharpen the razor by stroking it up and down a leather strop usually hanging from his chair, with a strop made of wood considered the best. Upon completing the cowboy's shave, the barber would use a towel, likely one that had been employed on numerous previous customers, to wipe his face. Following this, he'd apply bay rum shaving lotion and utilize a styptic pencil on any cuts he might have inadvertently caused. Jockey Club fragrance for men, introduced in 1840, gained widespread popularity. After the shave, the cowboy would sit up straighter. If the barber was shorter and the cowboy taller, the barber might stand on a wooden box. In the 1800s, various hairstyles were in vogue: the Jackson style, combed back and short akin to Andrew Jackson, or the half shingle, quarter shingle, and pompadour. However, due to the lack of regulation in barbering until the early 20th century, the cowboy's barber might have only been familiar with a single haircut, which he applied universally. While the cowboy got his haircut, A dog might stroll into the shop and settle down. Someone could strike up a song or play a musical instrument, especially in the evening when barbershops often turned into impromptu jam sessions. If the barber was weary, he might chatter away excessively, possibly annoying the cowboy accustomed to the serene openness of the plains. Alternatively, the barber might be so fatigued that he became irritable, not in the mood for conversation, which could also vex the cowboy seeking some human connection. After using the scissors, the barber would employ a razor to trim the back of the neck. Following a thorough combing or brushing to eliminate loose hair, a soft brush sprinkled with powder would be used to clear hair from the cowboy's neck and shoulders. Some barbers were adept at giving quick massages to the shoulders and neck. If the barbershop also served as a bathhouse, the barber might inquire whether the cowboy wished a bath for around 75 cents. While price competitions were common, especially in places like New York City, the phrase "shave and a haircut 2 bits" fits well with the Old West time frame. For fresh water in his bathtub, the cowboy might pay around 50 cents, but if he was okay with bathing in used water, the price could drop to 25 cents. On Saturdays, however, the cost of a bath might go up to 75 cents. Before the advent of faster manual hair clippers in the late 19th century, a scissor cut and shave would take about 45 minutes. If the cowboy stuck around in town, he'd probably visit the barbershop 3 times a week for a shave. If he took a liking to someone of the fairer sex, he'd likely take a bath once a week, whether he felt the need or not, and get his hair trimmed every 2 weeks, possibly weekly if he deemed the situation warranted it. In The Trail Drivers of Texas, as recounted by Jack Potter in J. Marvin Hunter's compilation, Potter shares his experience of joining a trail drive in 1882, bound for Colorado, near Greeley, when he was a 16-year-old cowboy from San Antonio. He earned $30 a month with transportation back included. On his way home, he made a stop in Denver and visited a barbershop close to the St. Charles Hotel. After the barber finished with me, he asked if I wanted a bath. When I said yes, a black porter guided me down the hallway and into a side room. He turned on the water, tossed me a couple of towels, and then disappeared. Potter undressed and allowed the water to flow until the tub was almost full. Unaware that the water was coming directly from a hot boiler, he jumped in, let out a scream, like a Comanche, and promptly leaped back out, slipping and falling on the marble floor. After floundering for a bit, he managed to rise using a chair for support, there fanning himself with his large Stetson hat, and inspected his feet to check if he still had toenails. Being the joker that most cowboys were, he later recounted this scalding incident with a hearty laugh many years later. Barbers have consistently evoked mixed feelings even in the Old West. On one side, a dependable barber was a valuable gem never to be overlooked. On the flip side, he held the power to slit one's throat with a stroke of the blade. Like any regular person, he was susceptible to vices, with gambling and womanizing being common ones. However, a barber with an unsteady hand and the scent of alcohol on his breath typically didn't endure long in the profession. Especially in a one-chair shop, the barber took on a role akin to a father confessor. His customers would share their personal problems. Elderly men would often reminisce about their departed wives. Struggling ranchers might discuss their issues with wives. Struggling ranchers might discuss their issues with the bank. He had to hear everyone else's challenges and keep them confidential. Frequently, he was sought after for advice. Requests for loans were not uncommon, and many times he'd let a man in dire straits sweep the shop in exchange for a haircut. He had to listen to a preacher urging him to come to Jesus, even if he already felt sufficiently religious. He was expected to be aware of all the world news, happenings in his town, and the latest jokes, and more often than not, he lived up to those expectations. Moreover, if there was no doctor in town, he might find himself being asked to use his sharp instruments to extract a bullet, pull a tooth, or even perform an amputation. The barber, standing on his feet with his hands up in the air for long hours, quickly learned that to make it through the day, he had to sit and rest whenever possible. A cowboy accustomed to the rugged outdoors might walk into a comfortable shop, see the barber sitting, and think he had a lazy, cushy life. unaware of the physical demands placed on a barber working 12 hours or more a day. To make ends meet, a barber might diversify his business by selling cigars, operating a shoeshine stand, or even running a gun shop. Some less scrupulous barbers might utilize a back room for a bookie parlor or engage in other unsavory activities. In cowtowns, a bathhouse would likely serve as the barber's additional business. A substantial amount of money was earned through the sale of tonics, and many barbers crafted their own formulas for bay rum, shampoo, hair dye, and remedies for baldness. Some of these preparations carried risks, but no responsible barber would intentionally harm his customers, as his livelihood relied on their well-being. His counters might showcase ornate bottles with elaborate labels holding his enigmatic concoctions, adding to the atmosphere and mystique of his shop. As discussed in Part 1, music often played a crucial role in a barbershop. The distinct harmonizing style known as a barbershop quartet emerged in the mid-19th century, likely rooted in African American singing traditions. However, the term itself wasn't coined until the early 20th century. The powdered wigs of colonial America had vanished by 1837, relieving barbers of the obligation to possess a scarificator or other bloodletting tools. Before 1858, the only socially acceptable men who could sport beards were writers, artists, and pioneer settlers. In 1830, a Massachusetts man was even arrested for refusing to shave his off. Out west, however, the scenario was quite different. Beards served as effective protection against sunburn and frostbite. A miner engaged in gold panning cared the scruffiness of his hair. Yet, introduce women into the mix, and everything changed. By the onset of the Civil War, beards and mustaches had once again become fashionable, and this trend persisted until the late 1800s. However, to maintain a tidy and attractive appearance, mustaches and beards still required the expertise of a barber. His toolkit now included a mustache curler and an alcohol lamp for heating, curling irons, and he carried mustache wax to sell to his customers. Sporting shiny, slicked-back hair became immensely stylish. The primary ingredient in these pomades was bear fat, and there were instances where it would literally drip down the collar. Women began crafting doilies, commonly referred to as antimacassars, to salvaguard their furniture. With limited awareness of germs and lacking licensing inspections, customers could unwittingly contract and transmit impetigo, scabies, scabies, erysipelas, favus, tinea barbae, and head lice. These ailments were collectively labeled as barber itch, easily spread through unclean towels, non-sterilized razors, combs, brushes, and shaving mugs. Barbers often had specific remedies for barber itch, such as a mixture of vinegar and tincture of muriatic iron applied with a feather. The standard treatment for head lice involved soaking the scalp in coal oil for 30 minutes. However, barbers were well within their rights to advise those afflicted to address the issue at home before returning to their shop. After the Civil War, a significant number of African American men joined the barbering profession. At that time, there were no fees or licenses, making it a relatively inexpensive way to start a business. Most white individuals didn't have an issue with having a black barber cut their hair or shave them. However, due to the prevalent prejudice of the era, a black man couldn't simply walk into a white barbershop for a haircut, nor would he necessarily desire to. The unique nature of curly hair required specialized training to cut properly, a skill that very few whites even possess today without complications. Interestingly, due to its properties, curly hair does not provide a conducive environment for head lice. As for Native Americans, they had their own customs regarding hairstyling and body hair removal. Consequently, the majority of them had little interest in visiting a barbershop for many years. Moreover, during that time period, if they had sought service in a white barbershop, they likely would have faced refusal. Mexicans, known for their meticulous attention to detail, excelled as barbers, but they seldom crossed the color barrier to serve whites or blacks. Many of them employed a technique called singeing, utilizing caves. Singeing was believed to be beneficial for hair health, preventing it from falling out. When executed properly, the customer would only feel a slight warmth on their face as their whiskers were singed away. Anglo barbers adopted this process, often performing it after a haircut to seal the ends of the hair. However, burning hair produces a foul smell, prompting barbers to encourage customers to opt for a shampoo afterward. This involved having the customer stand with their head leaned over a basin. In 1867, Galveston, a 30-year-old immigrant woman who went by the name Madame Gardoni, ran a prosperous barber business and employed 2 men in her shop. By 1870, a female barber in Detroit made headlines in Emporia, Kansas. In 1883, a Spanish proprietor hired 4 girls to work in his Sedalia, Missouri shop. While newspapers spoke favorably of these women, the general public often viewed them as somewhat disrespectful. The barber was frequently summoned to cut the hair of an ailing man at his residence or to visit the funeral parlor to tidy up the deceased for a wake. The sick man often had a more severe and infectious disease than his relatives had disclosed, making the preparation of a deceased body a task only for those with a strong stomach. A wealthy cattle baron might hire a barber to come to his hotel room for a shave and a haircut. However, these hotel visits were not without risks. If the person seeking services turned out to be a wanted man, the barber could find himself caught in the crossfire of a gun battle with the law. Young barbers, in particular, were exposed to danger. In large cities, a young barber might suddenly find himself subject to unwanted advances. A quick way to halt such behavior was to place a cold razor on the offender's neck and whisper how much one detested the sight of blood. The barber was also at risk of being attacked by a gang of ruffians once inside the hotel room. The barber in the West was just as community-minded as his fellow citizens. In 1892, a barber participated in the assault on the Dalton gang during the Coffeyville raid, firing a load of buckshot that dislodged Emmett Dalton from his saddle, effectively putting an end to the raid. In John D. Fitzgerald's novelization of his mother's recollections about a Wild West mining town, he recounts a system of deputies organized by the local sheriff to maintain law and order. When a young troublemaker entered town boasting about his body count, the sheriff gave him until sundown to leave. Ignoring the warning, the outlaw made the mistake of getting a haircut instead. The diminutive-sized barber, one of the sheriff's deputies, enjoyed conversation and didn't seem to mind when the outlaw sat in his chair for a shave and a hair. The process was significantly slowed by the barber's talkativeness, and by the time the sun went down on the other side of the mountain range, only half of the outlaw's face had been shaved. The barber set down his razor, took out a Smith & Wesson from a drawer, proceeded to place the barrel in the gunman's ear, pulled the trigger, all the while stating, "I kill you in the name of the law." Guns were reserved for dealing with outlaws. The razor was revered as a sacred tool and profession.